No, I don't think foreign trade zones will ever go away, and I don't think they've ever been in more demand. With the highly volatile regulatory environment that we're all operating in as trade professionals, foreign trade zones offer companies the ability to save money and protect their bottom line. So I don't think that will ever go out of trend, right? Like saving money.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hey, folks, we're back for another show of Simply Trade. And I always start off in there saying we are greatly appreciative of your listenership and your sharing us. And we are growing. You guys are spreading the word about our show. And Lalo and I are very, very appreciative. Like I just used that again. I know I'm being redundant, but oh my gosh, you guys are so fantastic. So, put some comments on LinkedIn. That's one of the things that I look at a lot, and there's things getting around. But if you like our show, share it, but also post some things on LinkedIn. Reach out to us and connect with us on LinkedIn. Of course, there's the other stuff. I'm more of a LinkedIn guy, so obviously. But with that, Lalo, how's it going, buddy? This is a busy time right now for a lot of people. It seems like as we're trying to schedule meetings, everybody's busier than the one-armed dairy farmer at milking time. And I'm like, I don't have much time on my schedule, but it's like I have about 5 projects going. I don't know. How about yourself, sir?
Oh, yeah, same thing. I mean, the one thing, though, and I want to make the audience very aware of this, is that this is probably the one meeting that is recurring on our calendar, right? And
yes,
I work around it.
Yes.
And it's the one that I don't try to I don't reschedule, so I want everybody to know we are very committed to the show. And we in fact, our co-host, Anik, for the news show, she says that this is the theme of in her week that she looks the most forward to. So that's really cool. It is really a lot of fun to record and talk to people and just shoot the breeze with people about trade, because that's just what we do.
Well, I will tell you this. I'm getting some messages from folks, and it's been interesting. I've had actually 2 separate situations very similar that one person was a friend, the other one was a partner of theirs, that they were having to cart their friend or partner around in their car to take them to doctor's offices and things of that nature. And as crazy as this, it was a non-transportation and a non-compliance, non-international trade type person. And so listening to these podcasts. So in other words, the driver is in compliance and they're playing our podcast show. And it was interesting to say that their partner has come back and said, what's up with Andy and Lalo? They missed them. They've been missing our show or something. And they're like, well, I thought I would bore you with all that stuff. So it's like, it's been unreal. There's a lot of folks that are not in trade. We even had a recent one, Lalo, that you saw the email on, make the comment, Andy, I've never been interested in international trade. They listened to the show out of courtesy for me, somebody I went to high school with, and they said, you know what? Not only did it keep our interest, or their interest, but they actually learned something. So, hey, I guess we're striking a nerve somewhere, but I have to draw pictures here because I'm like slow on the uptick. So when we get good guests like it's going to come up today, we're going to get to talk about some foreign trade zone stuff and whatnot. So it's getting into not beyond your basics on some things here, but I'm excited about today's show.
Yeah, I am too, for several reasons. Number one, we're picking up where we left off with Jeremy Page. His episode was really hot, really good. I know that our next guest, I know she knows Jeremy, and I know they've collaborated with him in the past because She happens to be my former coworker. We used to work together, although we didn't work that closely because I was mostly doing stuff for Mexico and NAFTA, or not NAFTA, but FTAs and stuff like that. But her role is a lot having to do with foreign trade zones, or as people call them, free trade zones. But we already went with that with Jeremy. We know that's not what they are, but
technically
anyway,
it's foreign trade zone. Yeah.
Foreign trade zones, and then we also I know she's like a genius with when it comes to like ABI stuff. I remember she bailed me out on with a client one time, and that was trying to trick me on something, and she's like, no, that's not what we did. And so it was awesome. So she knows her ABI really well as well. So, or her brokerage reporting. So anyway, I guess I'll let everybody know. Her name is Liz Connell. Well, you'll find her on LinkedIn as Elizabeth Connell, but we all call her Liz. We'll have her data and information on the show notes. But yeah, and so her progression was she came from Integration Point like I did. I know she was with someone else in other companies before that, and we'll let her talk about that. And then now she's with Thomson Reuters, of course, because that's who purchased or acquired Integration Point. But she's not a developer, so we're not going to be talking techie or anything, but she's really good on the content. Really, really good. So anyway, Andy, I don't know if you might have anything else before we...
No, actually, I mean, we'll get into this, I'm sure. But Liz, welcome to the show. We are so thankful for you to join us, and looking forward to today's discussion.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks, Liz. Nice to see you again.
I know, it's been way too long.
It has been.
Well, I'm going to jump into it, and let's start off with, all right, we were talking and kidding around with FTZ being foreign trade zone, free trade zone, all that. All right, folks, it is technically a foreign trade zone is how it's referenced in the U.S. There are things that are called free zones, and that's a similar but different type of a deal, and that's for another day. So we're going to talk about foreign trade zones. And with that, it's a bonded warehouse type thing, so you can bring product in. So Liz, correct me if I go wrong here, is so you can bring in items from offshore, and you're not clearing it into the commerce. So it's a bonded warehouse. And let's say you bring in 10,000 widgets. And the beauty of a foreign trade zone is that you can, let's say that I only need to bring out 1,000 widgets at a time. So I don't have to bring out and clear into the commerce all 10,000. I can break it up and bring out what I need and clear it into the commerce, let's say 1,000. And let's say another 500, I'm selling to some other country. So I'm going to bring that out and send it straight out. So I don't clear it into the US, but I'm going to send straight out. So have I got that right?
You've got it right. Yep.
Okay. I can learn something here. Okay, folks. Now, with a foreign trade zone, know that Jeremy Page, if you haven't heard the show that we did with Jeremy, you really should make a note to go back and listen to it. Jeremy did a great job. That guy's going to forget more than I'm going to get to learn on it. So, Liz, with that, let me just ask, what are the trends right now with foreign trade zones and all that? Are they still a viable option for folks, or is this an idea that has come and gone?
No, I don't think foreign trade zones will ever go away, and I don't think they've ever been in more demand. With the highly volatile regulatory environment that we're all operating in as trade professionals, foreign trade zones offer companies the ability to save money and protect their bottom line. So I don't think that will ever go out of trend, right? Like saving money.
Not only saving money, but also to help this for any CFOs out there, you need to be listening on this because it will really help you manage your cash flow too.
Totally. And when we say save money, we're talking like billions of dollars annually are saved because of U.S. foreign trade zones. It's also bringing the jobs here to the United States, which is really important, and getting closer to your customers. So I think there's a lot of financial and sort of social benefits of the foreign trade zone program.
I love it. So I will say we're going to get into some of the regulatory things. There is something that is like a burr under my saddle when it comes to the current laws and regulations on foreign trade zones in the U.S. You were talking about creating jobs. We cannot seem to get Congress to move on this, and Customs is saying, or CBP is saying, it's going to take a legislative change because their interpretation is in the e-commerce world to not allow the use of de minimis shipments coming out of a foreign trade zone in the U.S. And so basically, folks, what I'm saying is that somebody in a manufacturing plant can ship, let's say, 1,000 widgets to the U.S. to 1,000 different destinations. So people are ordering things. So as they're doing that and they're ordering and those orders come in, they can, if it's valued less than $800, that's a de minimis thing, meaning it's a non-entry type of, it's cleared off the manifest. Okay. So when you get it, when you're ordering something off online, you don't care where it comes from. You're just like, hey, I want it here now and all that. Okay. What happens now is that a foreign seller has the benefit of taking advantage of the de minimis deal, whereas a U.S. company that has a foreign trade zone cannot. So a foreign entity has greater privileges in this particular realm than a U.S. company. What happens now is that there's a legislative change that needs to happen. So what happens now is there's a lot of these distribution centers that they'll still get these shipments from, let's say, a factory in Malaysia or wherever, and they'll go up to Canada or even down to Mexico or somewhere else. And they have these distribution centers where the jobs are pick and pack for the orders. Then they'll drive them across by a truck or whatever. But that pick and pack distribution center is in a foreign country instead of the U.S.
I was going to say, Andy, yeah. And worse yet is that's exactly it. That's worse yet is that why not keep those jobs in the U.S. to do something like that? And I mean, it doesn't even have to be a foreign company that's taking advantage. It could be even the U.S. company that's setting up shop foreign just to take advantage of that, right? I mean, that's what you're trying to say is that, I mean, why not keep the jobs in the U.S.? And yeah, it's something we've talked about before.
Yeah, I'd also add the FTZ not only keeps the jobs in the U.S., but also adds a level of security and safety.
Well, and the other thing is here's another thing is that it helps in the supply chain because you get things backed up that are backing up because of the longshoreman strikes or threat thereof. And we talked about that, and I get madder than a wet hen over that stuff. And then as it comes in, you're going to get this stuff into the U.S. and could be distributed from here. It still does, but it actually raises the way the U.S. Regulations are. It is actually raising the cost to the importer, the U.S. company, instead of the foreign entity. And so it's a little frustrating. So the point being, out of all that, I hope that we didn't go too far off for you folks. What I'm getting at is legislatively, Liz, let me ask the question. Are there any plans to get a bill to modify or put a law out there that would then subsequently modify the regulations that would allow de minimis shipments coming out of a FTZ, and it would help support the e-commerce modality?
Yeah, there is a whole coalition going right now to try. It's actually got bipartisan support to try and make this change to the regulation. I actually haven't recently gotten an update, but hopefully they make some significant progress because I think it would be a huge benefit to the FTZ program.
So what else is hot in the in regulatory or legislative side of things for that you're seeing right now, and any trends?
Yeah, so I'd say maybe one thing that we're watching really closely is our dear friends at CPSC, Consumer Product Safety, are spinning up their requirements for electronic filing. And so there's some early piloting that's going on with customs. The reason I think this will be a big topic for zones is it just impacts so many industries, right? Anybody doing consumer products, which is a lot of zones. So it's still early, but there's there's a lot going on that I would say that's one I'd watch really closely as far as regulatory changes coming that impact foreign trade zones.
So they're looking at actually doing electronic filing of some things?
Just like the other PGAs did a few years ago. So with ACE, the automated commercial environment that Customs spun up a few years ago, is part of that they had that single window, right, for all of the partnering government agencies to collect data. And that at that time it was National Highway Safety, EPA, APHIS. So we had a lot of partnering government agencies go online and collect data electronically back then. A few were stragglers. So Fish and Wildlife, CPSC sort of said, we're going to hold off. We're going to let you guys have a little time, and then we're going to start collecting our data electronically. Well, both of them have started down the process of evaluating the data elements they want to collect at time of entry. And so I think this one will be one that will be impactful.
Well, one of the things I remember when I was dealing with some things with the CPSC, first off, let me say this. I am actually very pleased to hear that they're stepping into the 21st century regarding some electronic filing. Literally, we were, and this is probably 10 years ago, but as we were looking and there was a lot of activities on some things, they were proposing regulations and procedures that, it just wasn't going to work. They wanted us to, first off, the CPSC list of commodities was not synchronized with the harmonized tariff schedule, which is what all brokers use and most, everybody out there, utilizes. And so there was an effort in that. So hopefully that is getting resolved. I hope that they're using the harmonized tariff schedule. If not, that'd be something that Lalo, we may need to get some folks on about CPSC and see what the latest is. But the other was they were wanting the broker or the importer, but hence if it's the importer, it goes to the broker and the broker has to get the information and it has to come then usually from the shipper and all that. They wanted a piece of paper that confirmed or, not confirmed. What's the word? Say that this does not have CPSC jurisdiction. So they denied it. And it basically would have been for every single shipment out there. It's like, well, you don't have the staff to look at it. So, and we kept going around and around. And I finally asked the question. I said, why are you proposing a 19th century process in a 21st century world? And it kind of, it clicked for him. I said, you're doing something that would be from the 18 and 1900s, early, 1900s. We're way past that now. So I'm glad to hear they're doing electronic filing or looking at it. So,
yeah, and they are flagging Andy by HTS number. So that is their indicator. Excellent. That would flag at entry. And so for those of you that don't know CPSC, they're going to be collecting things around like lab tests and certification for compliance and flammability and things like that, that are very specific per shipment, per like batch, and can be kind of cumbersome for it. And I wouldn't say it's just FTZs. It's really all importers are impacted kind of thing.
I was going to say it'll affect just about almost any industry because sometimes you go into a foreign trade zone so you can, like Andy said earlier, distribute, and normally you wouldn't, manufacture here because it's manufactured somewhere else. But so it would affect just about almost any industry though, right? That's what you're saying, Liz?
Consumer products, yeah.
Right,
yep,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so CPSC processes may be affecting foreign trade zones. What else?
I'd say the other hot topic that I know the NAFTZ or the National Association for Foreign Trade Zones is watching really closely is when Customs programmed ACE on 3461 of your cargo release, they had a 999 line limit to the size of the cargo release that could be filed. On summary, they did it to 99,999 lines, which is now impacting a lot of zones. So as you can imagine, an FTZ does weekly entry. So a lot can go out of the zone in a given week. And a line is made up of the HTS code, the country of origin, the mid code, the status of the product. And so with the new regulations around like the Uyghur Forced Labor Act and the requirement for zip codes and some of the 232 tariffs and 301 tariffs, the lines in the foreign trade zone entry are just getting longer and longer. And so more zones are running into that 999 limit. And so there's a task force trying to help customs find a way to expand that line limit so that it limits the number of weekly entries that zones have to file.
What we're talking about, folks, is a case of like the number of lines on an entry. So it's like, if you have a grocery list and you're sitting there and it's like, all the different things you're buying. Well, each item is a different line. So, you can just envision that. Well, why is it a big deal and all that? Well, the databases and the systems were only set up for like, maybe 5 digits or 6 digits in the quantity of line items and things. And so, believe it or not, it's a big deal to reprogram all the systems to handle, again, additional line items. So that's what's up against it. And you're looking at legacy systems that have been out there for many decades, quite frankly. So that's why that's a big deal.
Yeah. And Andy, I guess one of the things we didn't talk about as far as the zone benefit, yes, you don't have to pay duties until they ship into the commerce of the U.S., but you also only have to do a weekly entry. So instead of, say, 10,000 entries a year, you're summarizing everything that's left the foreign trade zone in a 1 week period. And so because you're doing all of the shipments for a week, that's a lot of stuff that could potentially be on the entry. So to get to 999 lines can happen rather quickly.
So there's a lot of complexities with it. All right. Well, with that, so what? Let's shift gears here a little bit. What would you think would be, as far as the benefits and all that, somebody getting into a zone or whatever? What's probably the top 3 things from your perspective, Liz, that would make somebody going into a zone and utilizing the zone? What would make them the most successful if they had adhered to, your top 3 things?
I'm obviously biased, but automation is clearly number one in my mind. I personally don't know how you could be successful running a zone without automation. There's just so much data that's required. Zones are an incredible program. You can save tons of money, but there are daily, weekly, monthly reporting obligations. So automation and data quality are pretty critical to being successful, right? Having really good data that's clean makes that filing and those reporting obligations much easier. So I think those are maybe 2 of my biggest recommendations: automation and data quality. But the third would be get company buy-in. So I actually started my career working for Reebok, starting 9 foreign trade zones for them. And at the time, it was the first footwear company to turn into an FTZ. So there were a lot of learnings that had to happen way back. And I won't tell you what year that was, but it was a while ago.
Breaking new ground there.
But it required buy-in from the inventory team, the compliance, logistics. It even required buy-in from the designers and the procurement teams. Like it just having everybody really understand that they played a role in the success of the FTZ program made a real difference to the success, so that we could get actually 9 FTZs up and off the ground in like a couple of months. It couldn't have been done if it was just coming directly from the compliance or finance department, right? It really had to be everybody involved, because again, data quality is going to come from a lot of different places. It's not just, what did you receive and what did you ship? We need to know the HTS number and the price of the goods and who you bought it from, which is all the procurement and like system. Like it's making sure all of that data is valid and understanding who's responsible for what along the way, so that you're maximizing your savings out of the zone, right? So, yeah.
Well, I will say this. One of the things when we're talking about clean data, obviously we were just talking, we both, in one of my previous positions, came across a situation where, I was working for a service provider, and the client that we had, provided a test file of a parts listing. And so it's, what's going to go, the inventory that's going to go into this warehouse. This particular client had both domestic and foreign goods, meaning there would be items that were already cleared into the U.S. or manufactured in the U.S. that were, the inventory was being commingled with foreign goods, if you will, have foreign goods, meaning it has not cleared into the U.S. yet. The unfortunate is in the test data, as you're setting up and getting, they put in a lot of bogus values and bogus information. If they were just, it's just for tests, and it was supposed to be purged, and it wasn't. And it took a while, and the next thing you know, the sky was falling, and literally due to this test data, there was an entry submitted for release on that weekly entry. And so literally the duties and taxes assessed on bogus information was in excess of $5 million in a given week. And so I'm, all kinds of stuff was going on. So here's where I'm going is that if you're running a FTZ now, and your inventory list, you need to look at your parts listing on it. If you're thinking about going into one, or if you're not running one, I would also recommend that you do this with your parts listing. Is if you're in the compliance, it would be very interesting to get your parts listing file and literally look at the values, and in that, look at any values that would, let's say, over, I don't know, let's say anything over 1,000 or anything over 5,000 or anything over $10,000, whatever you've got, you got to pick a line there and just see how many parts come up that are valued over that. And if it's too many, then you narrow your scope down. But what we found was people were putting in $999,999.99. And it was a computer mouse in this particular case. So a little mouse that you will use, right? And it was valued at, $100 million or, whatever it was. It's like, good night, or whatever. Forgive my ignorance. I don't know, whatever it was just exorbitant. If you look at that, you can clean that kind of stuff up to me and say, hey, that's just one aspect. And, I'm not talking about country of origin and stuff like that. But
No, and I think you're tying in not only data quality, but the automation I mentioned earlier, that like having that visibility to run those kind of reports and see that kind of outliers, the exceptions to your process is critical to the success of a FTZ program.
And without, I guess, disclosing any trade secrets or anything, but let me ask you, because this is what's the current buzzword in technology today, right? AI. So, I mean, is there any AI that you guys maybe not you, but in the industry could benefit from? Because, I mean, we've talked to other vendors that might be doing AI for classification, for example, right? And then we have AI for forced labor, and you name it. I mean, country of origin and et cetera, that makes your job so much easier to know that there's already like a product DNA, for example, and et cetera. I mean, I know the FTZ will work a little differently, but do you see anything like AI impacting or helping with a foreign trade zone? And again, without you saying, "Oh yeah, we're doing this." I mean, you say what you need to say, But anyway,
No, it's very topical. Oh, really, honestly, it's all I think about pretty much all the time. AI. I don't think there's any industry more perfect for AI than global trade. Period. Right? As a whole, there's so much opportunity. Um, but for FTZ specifically, for sure, we've got the smart HS and the classification tools. But I think there's opportunity for AI for well, let's use the example, Andy, you just did of anomaly detection, right? If a price doesn't look normal of what's coming in, could it flag to warn you that this commodity, this price, this mid code, this whatever it is, throw it out uh, as an anomaly to try and mitigate risk or catch that issue in advance and learn from trends of what the FTZ had been doing in the past, right? Or I think there's compliance insights that are potentially available, right? Like to learn about another hot topic in the zones world right now are zone to zones, right? Where you're getting either your other distribution centers or facilities or even your suppliers into foreign trade zones. So it's pretty common in like the automotive heavy machinery to like I may manufacture cars, but I'm going to have my supplier of steering wheels and tires and engines and whatever components get into a foreign trade zone. So then we can all benefit from the elimination of the duty and the lower duty rate of the finished good coming out of the foreign trade zone. That would be a great opportunity in my mind for AI, identifying opportunities in your supply chain to save even more money.
And with that, let's we just hit on kind of some complex deals here. So I'm going to simplify a scenario so folks
Yep.
can catch what we're doing here to make sure I understand it. All right. So somebody let's say that they've got some auto parts in this case, like you just said, some steering wheels, some, rims for the tires or, a door handle, whatever it is. They have it manufactured wherever it is. It's imported into the U.S. and put into a supplier's foreign trade zone because they're going to be supplying that not only into the U.S., but they, shipping it around the world. Hence the one of the biggest pluses for an FTZ. They in turn sell that. Let's just say they sell it to BMW. And BMW has a factory in Greer, South Carolina. Beautiful place, by the way. Great people up in there. And I was salivating when I got to go through that plant because I was like, oh, these are beautiful here. Anyway, okay, I digress. And so they're selling to, let's say, BMW in that particular case. So there's your zone to zone because their whole factory is a foreign trade zone. And they're able to then go through and manufacture within that zone. And when the product comes out, they're not clearing it as a steering wheel. They're clearing it as a vehicle, hence a whole different deal. But that's your zone to zone. Well, when you're transferring zone to zone and the ownership, it's got to go out of one person's responsibility and their bonds and go into another person's responsibility and their zone and their bonds. So have I got that right?
You got it. Yeah. And we didn't maybe talk about that benefit to the zones program is that things like tires and steering wheels may have a duty rate of, say, I don't know, 12%, but a finished good car is like 2.5%. So you actually pay the duty of what leaves the foreign trade zone. So now instead of that steering wheel or tire company paying 12% and passing that cost on to BMW in your example, BMW can buy those products maybe for a little bit less and they can share the profits with each other. And then BMW puts it in a car and pays the lower 2.5% duty rate. So both parties end up winning and saving money.
Well, both parties win in that scenario of the supplier BMW and then ultimately the consumer in the U.S. in that case. So it's putting it all together. It's like nobody's getting away with something. It's all legal. It's all great. And it's actually a way for, the cost are minimized. So when people are looking at zones, I know there's a lot of things, and Jeremy talked about, setting up a zone if somebody's looking at one and, going from ground zero, setting it all up. One of the things that seems to be a challenge is usually in a zone, somebody that's got a zone for a while has had it for a few years. There's usually a changeover of personnel. So somebody, has been running it, they know it, whatever, and they finally move on to other things. They retire or they, get another job, promotion, whatever. So somebody else is assuming the roles. One of the things that seems to be easily overlooked until there's a panic sets in, and I know that your company has been good in pulling people's bacon out of the fire, is like the annual reports that are not just to customs, but it's to what's the oversight of that?
So it gets filed to the grantee, and that goes to the FTZ board.
Grantee.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Forgive my ignorance. My memory's as long as a turtle's tail and just as fast. Okay. To that annual report of the grantee. And so the information that comes in from all that stuff is that, again, you have to use automation. So folks, I'm going to tell you, folks like Liz could really give you some guidance on some of these things, even if you're assuming the role of a new in a new FTZ type thing and all that. And if you're using the Thomson Reuters systems and all of that, listen, you need to reach out to Liz. Or even if you have a question, I would assume if they reached out to you, you could at least probably is what I call bird dogging. It's like, well, I know somebody that can get me to the answers and I get closer to it. How's that?
Phone a friend. I've got many of those in the industry around zones.
That's your lifeline.
No, but you're right. That I think that's one of the biggest challenges with foreign trade zones is the loss of domain. It's funny how few people can spell FTZ, besides those of us in the industry and those who've set them up. So I think having the automation helps, but I also think there's great resources both through like certification courses that software providers can offer, but also the National Association of Foreign Trade Zones. They have conferences and stuff to help educate and bring up to speed. But I'd also add that zones aren't like a one and done program. Your businesses are going to evolve, systems are going to update, regulations are going to change. That from my perspective, either annually or every 2 years, it's really good to just kind of reassess and reestablish best practices, take a look at what you're doing in your zone and see if there's any kind of, hey, we're suddenly making new product or we're got new transaction codes we didn't map. Like you should have tools that help you on a daily basis catch that stuff, but it's good as a team, that whole sort of get everybody's buy-in to every few years reassess what's going on in the zone and just make sure that there aren't updates that you should be making.
So let me ask this question as we kind of need to come to a close on this segment here. But I would say, everybody talks about, managing the zone and the people they got their hands in there and they're the operators and all that. What about an executive of a company that down the chain, they have their compliance people and whatnot and their inventory management folks and transportation, and they are dealing with a zone? What should an executive be looking at? What would be a few questions that you don't have to be experts? They got experts working for them. But as an executive, what would you recommend for somebody, whether they're an executive of a service provider or an executive of like you were talking about, the Reeboks or the Nikes or the, the Dells or the BMWs? If they're on the finance side or if they're on the compliance side, what do you suggest maybe some questions they should ask to start things going, let me test the water. How good are we?
Well, I mean, obviously, if I'm a CFO, the first question I'm going to ask is how much has my zone saved me? And are there opportunities to increase that in some way? And what have we evaluated to do that? So most zone operating software have reports that can show you exactly what was saved over a period of time. And but looking for opportunities like the zone to zones that we have, or are we bonding our exports so that we can not pay the duty at all? Like, are there ways, because zones aren't an all or nothing program, right? I like to tell people to walk before they run. So, start your zone. Maybe you're not doing exports yet. And then after you get the hang of it and everybody's used to being a zone, then in 6 months, let's do QPWPs and start bonding our exports so we eliminate that duty. And then constantly look at ways to kind of fine tune and optimize the zone. So I would say if I'm a CFO, I'm going to say, okay, how much am I saving? And is there area to save more? And what would those be? And what would it take to take advantage or get those additional savings?
Let me stop for just a second. One of the things and I think first off, folks, I mean, if you're a CFO or on the finance side, whatever, this is some excellent advice. You don't have to be a super expert. You just ask some simple questions, and I guarantee you, man, it will create, that snowball coming downhill. There'll be a lot of activity. Oh, I got to get something here. But invariably, some of the things that go in there of parts of the company that are not putting their inventory into a FTZ where they should, they'll come back, oh, we're doing a duty drawback program, and look at how much money I'm getting back for the company. And I'm like, okay, but the company had to spend the money and all that. So you're hitting the company's cash flow. So I guess another part of that would be asking the question, if you're a CFO, you should be asking the question, how much money are we recouping through a duty drawback program? And it's almost like you're setting them up, because the other scenario there is, well, and is that inventory that is being cleared and doing a duty drawback when we sell it out, could it be moved into an FTZ process?
Right. That's a great point. So drawback, you're paying those duties, taxes, and fees, and the government's keeping 1% of it, assuming you can even optimize the whole drawback program. Now, for some companies, that makes a lot of sense. But with FTZ, you eliminate paying altogether and could potentially get some of that weekly entry savings and the inverted duty savings. And so then the savings start compounding on top of each other. And that's what makes zones so interesting.
Liz, I tell you, I greatly appreciate your conversations and entertaining my questions here. It's like, good night. It's, you definitely know your stuff. I think we need to know a little bit more as time goes on in another show here, where we can get into some of the nitty gritty of some of the systems, and maybe talk about some of the reports that people should be looking at and gaining, from the system and what it'll benefit you. It's one, if you're an operator. It's another, are there reports and things that would come in for, again, the C-suite and all that? There's a whole nother thing. Aside from the CFO, the COO and the CEO should be looking at, and marketing is like, how much traffic are we selling and bringing in and moving out, and how many jobs are we creating, and all those kinds of things could come into play.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back to talk to you about it sometime.
Yeah. Lalo, how about you, my friend? You got anything else to wrap up?
That's just it. I mean, I'm glad that Liz was able to come on. It's I've been chasing Thomson Reuters for a bit, obviously because of my past relationship with the team that came over, But I'm glad Liz was able to come in, and not only that, because we have had more inquiries about FTZs. We've only had that one show with Jeremy, which was actually very popular, and so we've had more inquiries about that, and having Liz on was a good follow up to what we had. So I'm really happy for that too.
Well, you might put out the word, if you guys still do those annual Charlotte meetings, maybe they need to invite Lalo and I, and we'll set up and do some recording of our shows from there.
We have Synergy coming up this November in Denver, actually. So mark your calendars.
Oh, there you go. Oh, man. Yes, and go do some skiing and all that. But it's like it's like, yeah, if you're looking for some somebody to facilitate or host the MC your conferences, Lalo and I would love to tag team that. So,
all right.
Anyway,
so Synergy's for our customers and for our prospects for global trade. So, and tax and legal professionals. It spans all of the Thomson Reuters products, but.
So at the very least, go and talk to a salesman and say, I'm interested, so they could at least invite you, right?
Yeah, there you go. Hey, it's a good group of people there. So it's like we've got some good friends there. And please convey to your internal to the company that Lalo and I both are saying, hello and we appreciate y'all.
All right, I will do. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you, Liz. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.